everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this session. My name is Becky Carlton, and I am a program specialist here at the Johnson County Library. And it's just amazing to see all your faces here and have this kind of energy and community. So thank you. I'm going to say a couple things and then I'll introduce our presenter. As we come together today, we acknowledge that this land has long been home to indigenous peoples who have stewarded it for generations. We recognize and honor the Kanza, Kaskaskia, Kickapoo, Osage, Peoria, Sioux, and Shawnee tribes, and acknowledge their continued presence, resilience, and cultural contributions. May we engage with this space, this place, with awareness, respect, and a commitment to learning from the past as we create together in the present. So again, thank you guys so much for joining us during this session. It's Rewriting Resilience, a neurodivergent approach to trauma and creative writing. Our presenter today, Mateo Moreno, is a playwright, director, and actor who first worked with the Coterie Theatre in 1997 as an actor in their production of The Lilies of the Field. He has recently come on board as a teaching artist and youth playwright. His plays have been presented in New York City, Hawaii, and the Kansas City area. His play Pitch is featured in the play collection We're Not Neutral, available for purchase on Amazon. Most recently, he wrote and plays Anything and The Softest Touch for Coterie Theatre's 2025 Summer Out Loud program. His play Broken Pieces will also be part of the 2025-2026 season at KC Public. His recent acting work includes the world premieres of Firework and Journey to the Poles of Inaccessibility, both of which premiered at the Unicorn Theater. He will next appear in a forthcoming play at Kansas City Actors Theater and continues to work with Coterie as a teaching artist. We are thrilled to have him here today, so please welcome Mateo Moreno.
Hello, everyone. My name's Mateo Moreno, and I'm a playwright, screenwriter, and actor. I work with Coterie Theatre, and I'm honored that they've asked me here today to represent them and speak to you all. I'm also a neurodivergent human. I'm a writer who didn't know he was neurodivergent until late in life. Honestly, knowing that now makes everything in my past make so much sense. I'm thrilled to share with you some of my own stories, some of the things that I find helpful, and I can't wait to hear from you all also, should you want to share. Also, I want to start off by saying that this is a very safe space. Don't worry about what your face is doing, making eye contact. Don't write as I speak, fidget, move around if you need to. I truly believe in writing that there are no rules, and the usual rules of polite society should not belong in this room either. If you are yourself neurodivergent, you know this, but there are some big differences between being a neurodivergent writer and being a neurotypical one. A neurotypical writer tends to process information and communicate in ways that align with the typical social and educational norms. If you're neurodivergent, you will process information, you communicate, and organize your ideas that diverge from the usual norms. What's great about this is that it often leads to, in my opinion, fresh and original writing styles and writing stories. And long before I knew I was neurodivergent, I knew I wanted to make stories and not do it the typical way that everyone else was doing it. When I was in grade school, I started making movies. And I don't mean I actually sat behind a camera like a young Steven Spielberg. What I did was far simpler to me. I drew movie posters. I created a world that would be engaging for me to see. I used movie stars of the day, Michael J. Fox, Kiefer Sutherland, Jamie Gertz. Pretty much the entire cast of The Lost Boys were on my retainer. Basically, I would insert myself into these films with them because I also knew I wanted to be an actor. I would create an entire plot hinted at in the poster, and then I would sit down and write what that is. They ended up being short stories of all different lengths, some with dialogue, some without. Sometimes I would finish the story, and other times I would get bored and move on to a new one. But I was always creating, but my own way. No one else I knew was doing it like this. I even gave every single movie poster a rating and would write articles on how the film did at the box office that year. And in this fantasy world as well, they were very, very popular, and I became very famous, and I dated Alyssa Milano. We were very happy. A movie poster has to tell me something that the movie hasn't told me before, and I still think that every day looking at them. It can't tell me too much, but it needs to tell me just enough. And posters give away too much all the time, just as trailers do. A great modern example of that is Captain America: Brave New World. The creators of that film were so worried about how it was going to be received that they made the third act reveal, the point where Harrison Ford becomes the Red Hulk, all in the trailers and posters. That's how they sold the movie. That's how they got you into the theater. It didn't happen until the end, but they went ahead and told you the end to get you there. To me, that is so frustrating. There's no trust, no story building, no surprises. Show me the entire film or a critical movie point, and nothing enrages me more. And if a poster did that as a kid, and you were my friend, I would tell you all about it for the next 45 minutes, whether you wanted to hear it or not. Now, I didn't know I was neurodivergent as a kid. I knew my brain seemed different than other kids, and I knew my interests were vastly different than others around me. I would find one thing I loved more than anything, and I would grasp onto it for hours, days, weeks at a time. I wanted others to be interested in this as well. And sometimes they were, but never as much as I was, and they were never interested as long as I was. I don't know why my friends didn't want to talk over and over about a very specific storyline in The Amazing Spider-Man that I had been obsessing over, and they needed to talk again with me because I saw a new angle to look at it. They wanted to talk about things that I didn't understand, like the WWF or sports in general. Now, I didn't understand how to talk about that, but if I wanted to be friends with people, if I wanted friends, period, I had to pretend to understand. And then once I did, boom, I have friends. But I also wanted to hyperfixate on something that no one else found interesting. And then boom, I didn't have friends anymore. Now, anyone who's lived that part of a neurodivergent community or a child has undoubtedly felt this over and over throughout your entire life. I mean, being a kid is hard. It's hard enough. Being a neurodivergent kid is exhausting, especially when you don't have the tools to understand what's happening or how to get through it. Masking becomes part of who you are, how to fit in to whatever circle is around you. Eventually, this got harder for me, and by 6th grade, I was considered too weird and became exiled into the ultimate banishment of high school prison, geekdom. My best friend stopped hanging around me because I embarrassed him one day in a very public setting. Turns out doing a Three Stooges act on a kid in the lunch line, it gets you punched. And it also gets the entire room to chant, "Fight, fight, fight!" And you're suddenly inside a movie that you really didn't want to be in. Man, I hated this. I was a tiny little kid too. Like, my body didn't grow until 10th grade. I was a giant head with little twig arms, little twig legs. And I knew something was wrong, and I had done something wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And I knew I didn't want to get punched again, because that wasn't fun. So I grabbed the kid with my back facing him, like this, and then I rammed him against the wall. Turns out, to anyone watching that, it looks like you're getting the snot kicked out of you. To me, it made sense, though, because if I had my back to him, he couldn't punch me in the face again. And if I just rammed him to a wall, they had padding on it, he wouldn't be hurt. It would be fine. To that kid, it was just really confusing. He just kept on saying, "What are you doing?" He didn't understand. He wasn't even mad anymore. And to your best friend, who was starting to get good at sports, and the girls were starting to think he was cute, it looked like popularity suicide. I was just trying to be funny, but I didn't understand that there were rules to that. But I learned that day, and I spent most of the next 4 years by myself. If we were to take a poll, a really honest poll, and honestly ask if grade school and junior high was great for you, I truly think most people would say no. Maybe it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great. It's not something that most people go, "Yeah, I wish I was 12 again. Now those were the days." It's hard being a kid. And if you don't understand why people don't like you or don't want to spend time with you, it's devastating, depressing. I grew up in the age before the internet, so if no one wanted to hang out with you, you just hung out with no one. There were no chat rooms, no online communities to bond with. It was just you and your thoughts. But hey, I wrote a lot. So much that it filled book after book, folder after folder. I continued to delve into other kinds of storytelling that I could connect with. By 7th grade, I had read half of Shakespeare's canon. The over-exaggerations and the details that he flourished, the way he had characters talk about everything they were feeling about each other, and then the other characters spoke back to them the exact same way, man, I got it. Shakespeare was definitely neurodivergent. It was like every character got to say everything they were thinking over and over. It was magic. If only people would sit and listen to me and talk to me about the things that I was interested in. I would listen to them for hours and hours as long as they reciprocated. I would understand that. That felt nice. That felt safe. I mean, I would try to listen about the WWF and NFL for hours or hours, and if a friend asked me to watch the game, I would. And they go on and on and on. But I wanted them to feel seen, so I would watch, and I would try to understand. Just most kids didn't reciprocate that. To this day, I can still enjoy sports in short, very short settings with people, but I still do not understand them. But as I grew older, I realized that I was living in a neurotypical world with rules that I didn't understand and people who didn't want to explain them to me. And they didn't understand the way that I saw the world. There were only one way to see things, one way to learn things. And I just didn't see things or learn things that way. I remember being in math class in high school and being able to come up with the correct answer, but not be able to show my teacher the correct way to get there. My teachers called it cheating. I just was solving the problem in a different way, and I didn't understand how to communicate that. The same goes for writing. Throughout grade school and junior high, I continued writing, but in ways that other people found weird or strange. Why was I creating stories of these fantasy worlds instead of living in the one I was in? Because it felt safe. I mean, I got made fun of, called names, and even I told my English and writing teachers, they told me that it wasn't real writing, only playtime writing, whatever that means. But I knew I was creating stories told my own way, and I was going to continue to do it that way. I took writing classes as I got older, and more often than not, the exercises in the way of correct writing didn't make sense to me. One teacher told me that every great writer writes every day, and if you're serious about writing, really serious, then you need to go fully in it, all or nothing, nothing else. And I thought about this, and I listened to him passionately telling me about how all the greats write every day, and I thought, that seems impossible, I'm gonna quit. I mean, having undiagnosed ADHD really seems like that was a mountain too far to climb. Has anyone ever had a writing teacher or a professor that used language that this is how you do it, or this is the correct way to do X, Y, Z? Because I did. I hated it. I knew from a very early age that this didn't seem right. There could not be one way to do this, or a best way to write. As I got into acting, I ran into acting teachers telling me that real actors, the greats, use Stanislavski, method acting, and the Adler technique, and the Meisner technique, and that TV acting isn't real acting, and comedy wasn't as good as drama. And I just thought, there's a lot of crazy, toxic talk. There's been some incredible method actors in our time. Daniel Day-Lewis is still one of my all-time favorite actors. But the methods that he uses, others teach and celebrate, are extremely harmful and absolutely are not the only way you can approach dramatic realness in a scene. And the same goes for writing. So many of my teachers, though, so many classes showed me and encouraged me to write like a neurotypical person, without considering that a neurodivergent mind is very different, and so surely there are different ways to write, right? If you're comfortable, by a show of hands, is anyone here in the room identify as neurodivergent? Okay, that's a large amount of the room. And you know from all, or even if you don't know, if you're unsure, our minds work differently. You've probably had many things in life happen to you where you don't do things like everyone else and you feel like an outcast or you feel like you're doing something wrong, but you know there's just a different way that your mind processes things, different way that you do things. I mean, anyone on the spectrum, whether you're autistic, ADHD, you have dyslexia, you have you just do things differently. You see the world differently. And to me, that should be celebrated. Another example of how I was taught to write like a neurotypical person is by writing an outline first. I've had several teachers tell me that only by writing an outline first, a full outline, can you truly start telling a story. Now that is a completely legitimate way of writing something, but my brain doesn't work like that. I don't think I've ever written anything successful with an outline first. That seems to me like an unnecessary and controlling barrier in storytelling. And I get it, some people are just trying to teach a class, and it can be impossible to know what everyone will work with and how it will work with everyone. But by taking an approach with writing and knowing that your class will be filled with both neurotypical people and neurodivergent people, there are multiple ways of teaching that lesson. That's how we can truly feel seen, everyone, and feel included, finally, with everyone else. Executive dysfunction is something that a lot of neurodivergent writers face as well. It's certainly something I faced. In fact, I will let you in on a little secret. I was asked to speak here, and I was thrilled, truly thrilled to share some insight and some of my own story, and then immediately I was overwhelmed and procrastinated for weeks and weeks, and I went, oh my God, I've got nothing, I'm a fraud, right? That's something a lot of us deal with, thinking we're a fraud. These things will never go away, but will get better. And by not shaming ourselves and having support in writing circles, in the way that we teach and share with other writers, that's how these things go from being overwhelming mountains that we certainly can't climb, to obstacles that are frustrating and annoying, but are completely manageable. Because there's nothing wrong with how our brains work. We just tend to overthink and procrastinate a bit more than others. Also, I want to state that neurodivergence is also a spectrum, of course. Everyone is different, which means what works for me may not work for you. But options are the key thing here. Options are what make all of us seen. There's not one solution, there's many. I was writing part of this in library study room, private room. I got a little quiet, and I was loving all the wood chairs I was sitting in. I was feeling the table, it was very smooth. Sensory is a very big thing for me. It was very quiet all around me. And then suddenly a tour group came by outside of my study room, and all my ADHD wanted to do was hear what they were talking about, what kind of tour group it was. Are they from out of town? What is it about? And oh my God, I'm trying to write, and I've just spent 40 minutes Googling tour groups in the area trying to find out who they are. Once they left, my quiet library was perfect again, until it wasn't. Because suddenly I needed a smoothie in my hand and a fidget toy that I left home, and maybe even Bob's Burgers in the background, because oh my God, I need sound. All right? That is how a lot of people write. It's not always the same, and you have to have a very certain way around you, not just how you write, but the area you're in. I know a lot of people can't write if the lights are fluorescent or too bright, or if the chair isn't the exact softness that they're used to. These are all challenges that neurodivergent people face. And networking or social events, for the most part, forget about it. I used to think I was great at networking events in New York until I realized I had to have a few drinks and a full-blown mask on to really, really be successful. Now, events like this are much more comfortable with me because everyone here is here to explore, to learn, to trade stories. There's no one to impress, no one to slip your resume to. It's just a simply beautiful place to share ideas, and honestly, having it at a library makes it all the more comfortable and satisfying. I've taken a lot of writing classes, been part of writing circles and groups, and I've learned a lot over the years. But one thing that's always stuck out to me was how different my approach was. I write in unconventional ways that many neurotypical writers that I've spoken to don't. My teachers would often have us do an outline, then a draft of our piece, go back to revise. That was crazy to me because that seemed wildly out of order. How was I going to know the outline of my piece if I don't start molding a character type ahead of time? Who's going to fill a story if I haven't started writing out random sequences of dialogues that are very specific and then mold a scene around them? Who's going to be interested in a story set in a town that's filled with characters that I haven't even thought about yet? That's how my brain works. But clearly, I didn't follow what my fellow writers or fellow teachers were putting out there. I wrote in a different way. I loved creating sharp, inventive sequences and then developed how certain characters would speak to each other, finding their voice before I even knew the story. I would often write the very last scene without knowing exactly how we got there. Sometimes these scenes stayed at the final scene, and sometimes I scrapped them all together. But this fragmented style became my map. It made sense to me. The chaos style made sense to my brain. Much more sense than trying to do an outline, then write, and then edit. That just seemed like such a boring way to tell a story. One thing I've always struggled with was my own executive dysfunction, as I said earlier, and editing my piece, finishing a piece on time, or finding myself staying with one story when I have 4 others that I want to start. My teachers were really happy with me. I was an easy person to teach, especially when it came to deadline time. But when I finished those pieces, every time it stood up to every neurotypical writer there. Often my teachers complimented the richness of my story and how easy the dialogue flowed, and they just wished I would listen more. When I tried to do it the neurotypical way, when I would listen more, my stories fell flat. Characters didn't have their own voice, and they often floated between ideas that seemed unrealized. It was fascinating to me, but it helped me realize that I knew me best. So the thing and the person that I needed to listen to regarding how I wrote and the approach that was going to work for me was me. I continued to use my own style of writing throughout my entire life, and I found my strongest voice appears the more comfortable I have been with my own unique style. But as I went from writing screenplays to stage plays, I found myself working out in real time how to write trauma, working through trauma, and continuing to create in this ever-evolving traumatic world. And I think it's incredibly important to tell stories that are either based around trauma or include trauma of some sort. It's helped me work through my own trauma and helped me help myself when others have seen or read the work and my own work and help them see themselves. But how to do it responsibly has always been my question. For example, my play Bohemian Valentine is being produced next year in Kansas City. It's making a Midwest premiere. I'm very excited about it. It's a play I'm very proud of, and it deals with romance in the middle of mental illness, dealing with depression, and how to simply make it to that next day. I felt it was an important story to tell, but having experienced a lot of the things that my play deals with, I didn't want to just sit in the pain or relive it over and over. I wanted to write it in a responsible way that didn't strip any of my creativity. Writing about trauma isn't only about reliving pain, it's about reclaiming authorship over your story, your mind, and your meaning. And that can be an incredibly powerful thing. As a neurodivergent writer, I've learned that writing about pain doesn't have to mean centering it. Sometimes it means rewriting that story, showing how the pain became language, and how that language becomes liberation. I used to think that writing about trauma meant staying inside of it. That means to tell the truth. I had to reveal the truth. But the more I become comfortable being a neurodivergent writer, I've learned that my mind doesn't move in straight lines. It loops, spirals, it revisits, reframes over and over and over. And somewhere in that movement, I've discovered something much more powerful than recounting what hurt me. I found the language of how I survived. Writing for me isn't therapy, it's translation on the page, a way to turn chaos into coherence, at least something I can hold on to. It's not about polishing pain into something palatable. It's about showing that even in the middle of it, there's intelligence, perception, and imagination at work. The story doesn't have to end at the wound. When you're neurodivergent, you notice the world differently. The texture of lights, the rhythm of silence, the small details most people skip past. I just had a conference an event that I hosted, and part of that was writing how the character steps in their shoes, whether they look at you in the eyes or not. Knowing those differences became a creative strength. They let you write from the places that feel raw and real, but also electric with curiosity and insight. So instead of only writing about trauma as the damage, I write through it. Use unconventional forms, nonlinear structure, and a sensory language to show that healing doesn't happen in a straight line. It happens in motion. For me, writing from strength means claiming authorship over my own story. It means refusing to let my pain be the only evidence of who I am. Neurodivergent writers don't just tell what happened. We rebuild the architecture of meaning itself. We turn fragments into form, survival into artistry, and silence into something that finally speaks back. When I first started writing, I was told that good stories have structure, a clear beginning, middle, and end. That every sentence should lead somewhere, and every paragraph should have a point. But that never felt true to the way I think or the way trauma actually lives in my body. Trauma doesn't unfold neatly. It returns in flashes, sensations, sudden memories. All of those interrupt you mid-sentence. So I stopped trying to force my writing into a straight line. Instead, I let it move the way my mind does, through fragments, sensory images, through the echoes of repetition. And I found that what people call unconventional is sometimes the most honest form of storytelling we have. A fragmented paragraph can mirror the body remembering. A run-on sentence can capture that racing pulse of anxiety better than any polished line ever could. A sudden shift in tense can show how memory pulls us backwards, even when we want to move forward. Those aren't mistakes. They're truth, spoken in the grammar of experience. When you're neurodivergent, form itself becomes its own kind of language. A pattern of rhythm, silence, or sensory detail can say what words can't. The structure bends to fit the mind, not the other way around. And that's its own kind of healing. To see that your way of thinking isn't a flaw to edit out or change, but a perspective to honor. Unconventional writing refuses to demand to make any pain tidy or linear. It says this is how memory feels. This is how the mind moves. This is how survival sounds. It invites readers not just to understand, but to experience a neurodivergent truth, to step into the rhythm of another consciousness. That's what writing does at its best. It doesn't just describe life, it translates it. And when we're brave enough to let our writing follow the patterns of our own minds, it becomes not just art, but evidence. Proof that there are infinite ways to tell a story, and infinite ways for us all to be whole. There's a kind of story that the world expects from people who've lived through pain. A story that centers the wound, that stays inside the dark room and never leaves. And for a long time, that's the only story I thought I was allowed to tell. But strength doesn't erase pain, it reframes it. It asks different questions. What grew here? What did I learn to see differently because of what I survived? How I survived it? Writing from strength isn't about pretending things were easy. It's about refusing to let struggle be the only evidence of who you are. When I write now, I try to begin not with what broke me, but with what still astonishes me. The way light filters through the blinds at 3 p.m., or how a single line of dialogue can hold my entire childhood. As a neurodivergent writer, this shift feels especially radical because my brain is wired for intensity, perception, emotion, or focus. I notice the world in high resolution every day. And that intensity can be overwhelming, but it's also a form of power. It means I can translate experience into language that vibrates, that pulsates with life off the page. I don't write to survive. I write to create. I write to imagine futures, to build new meanings out of pain, to find beauty that doesn't cancel out what hurts, but grows besides it. Strength to me isn't armor, it's transformation. The ability to turn what was heavy into something luminous, something that moves. When I write from strength, I'm never claiming that I'm healed. I'm showing that healing is ongoing, that it lives inside curiosity, imagination, and the courage to keep making art. Because survival is one kind of story, and creation is what comes after. Writing as a neurodivergent person isn't just about putting words on a page. It's about building a space big enough for how the mind actually moves, looping, feeling, remembering, imagining, and trusting there's meaning in that movement. It's about saying, my way of seeing the world is not a flaw. It's a form of art. When we write behind pain and beyond pain, we don't erase it. We reshape it. We remind ourselves that survival isn't the finish line of any story. It's the language we build from. And every time we choose to write from strength, from curiosity, from sensory wonder, from the wild intelligence of our differences, we make something that pain alone never could. One of my college teachers, who didn't care for me or my style of writing at all, told me that I'll only find success on some silly WB sitcom. Now to him, a classical theater-only snob, that was the lowest punch, a fate beyond death. It made me so mad at the time, even though, let's be honest, I would kill to have my work featured on some silly sitcom. But since then, I've stopped listening to such negativity and the keepers of the past. I've made my own rules. I've written a feature film, several short films, several plays, which were all produced in New York, Hawaii, and KC, and I'm still going. I invited that professor to my first big opening in New York City with the note, "It's not some silly WB sitcom, but maybe you'll still enjoy it." He didn't show up. We neurodivergent writers don't just break the rules. We are here to show that there were always other ways to tell a story. Spiral ways, sensory ways, non-linear, luminous ways. Our writing reveals that there are more ways than one way to make sense of being alive. Being alive is a language, and we're still inventing. That's what I love most about this kind of storytelling. It keeps becoming. Every fragment, every experiment, every new form is proof that we're not confined by what happened to us. We're still shaping, still inventing. Most importantly, we're still here. So when I write now, I don't ask, how do I explain my pain? What can I create from it? I ask, what can I create now from my pain? And that's the difference between writing to survive and writing to live. Thank you. We also have some time. I would love to hear anyone else's stories, how being neurodivergent has shaped you and your process of writing, who you are, how it's different than other people's writing, if you want to share. And if not, you can go get a taco. That's fine. Yeah.
So I have a bone to pick with a different speaker.
I'm glad it's not with me.
Not with you. And it related to like, and you can pick this bone right back at me. But it was about like plotting too much, and like at some point you just have to start writing, like get it. And some of what you were speaking about was very much like stepping into the character's shoes and like learning about the character that way. And it felt different than what I do in that moment. But then you continued and you talked about, and I tried to write some of this down, like you were writing inventive sequences and like character interactions and like focusing on voices and like even writing the end scene before the beginning. And that felt very much to me like having a ton of disparate plots that you're slowly trying to stitch together. And so that's my experience, but I have a question really. How do you handle all of those different pieces and putting that puzzle together in the end?
That's a great question. And this, again, will not work for everyone, but I love chaos. I really love chaos on a page. So when I create all of those multiple characters, all those different storylines, those interactions, that to me doesn't ever feel like a challenge. And it also doesn't feel like anything I have to clean up and make one story. I've made a map of stories. Now I can pick from it and start writing something if I want, or set it aside for later. One of my favorite, in the play, I talked about Bohemian Valentine. One of my favorite scenes in that is from a screenplay I wrote 4 years before that I was like, this doesn't work for this goes with this. I do that constantly too. I don't ever feel like writing too much is ever a hindrance. I think it's a beautiful palette to put on and then step back, and instead of being overwhelmed by it, go, where can I go with this? What's gonna inspire me? And it's not a linear roadmap. And it's something that the story is done when it tells me it's done. And then I can step away. But until then, I can keep picking and changing and moving and not stress about if I leave that little baby there crying in the mall because I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna play with that. It's totally fine. That to me is how I've felt the most success as a writer. By doing exactly what you do and what other people think is not the way to write, make a mess. See where it goes. And don't be overwhelmed by that mess. Yeah. Does anyone else want to share how they write?
Yeah. So. Do you want to use some of the light? Oh, sure. Thanks. So, I'm a writer, of course, mostly a poet, and in the KC poetry scene, at least where I go, Poetic Underground KC, I'd say most of us are neurodivergent. And that works really well for poetry because it's about saying things in ways that you can't any other way, and it's, you can deal with a lot of controversial topics and emotions and phrasing in ways that are typically outside, and even different forms of writing are considered like too taboo. And so I found a lot of community there, and well, I actually do write most every day because it helps me process the world and my emotions and an outlet, sometimes like screaming into the void, And I took a workshop a few months ago by Father Nathan Monk, who's very neurodivergent, used to be a Greek Orthodox priest, has left and everything. And one of his words of advice was, when you're struggling to write, and you're not sure like where it's like how it's all going to fit together, he said, like, whatever thoughts or ideas you have, write everything down, throw nothing away, and your next book or poem or whatever might be just on the cutting room floor. Yeah, that's what I have, I guess.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's such great advice, and ties in similarly to what you were saying too, is that overwriting, I hate throwing things away. Never throw any things away. If it's bad in your mind, it's not done. That doesn't mean throw it away. It's just not cooked long enough. It just needs a few more minutes in the oven. And you can come back to that whenever. And like you said, you write every day. There's no wrong way to write. I will become overwhelmed and I can't write, and then I will write for 4 months straight. You know, it goes in vibes. Or if I'm on my own deadline trying to get something out, I may write an entire play in a week. Doesn't mean it's done, doesn't mean it's cooked, but I needed to get it out of me. And I love that idea of having a cutting room floor. Because also, as you write, you're writing from the experiences that you have lived so far. Who knows what's going to happen in 6 months that you can then add to that poem or that story or that play or that short story, and to go, that's what I was missing. This beautiful character I created that I had nowhere, I didn't know where to put, now I know because of whatever happened in your life. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I'm also very ADHD, and so I mostly write through my notes app, and I have all the different folders, and I'm always writing 5 different poems all at the same time, and sometimes I go through and just finish multiple ones I've been stuck on for a while.
Yeah.
And just find little threads, thought trails, and try to piece them together over time. Sometimes you look through and you're like, wow, I just wrote a poem without even realizing, and it just fits together. You know?
I love that. Yes. Amazing. Yeah.
I thought I was the only one.
No, so I'm sorry. We'll go to you next. I'm sorry.
The magic thing now. Have you ever written with a co-writer? I'm also writing with a co-writer, and she's neurodivergent, and she's like, chaos, chaos. And I'm like, yes, write that down, but don't do it on a McDonald's napkin this time. Do you have any advice for working with a co-writer?
Yeah, knowing that they're never wrong and you're never wrong. It's about coming together and finding your groove, and that every co-writer you write with, you're going to find a different way of writing. I'm very much into Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare, and I found a person in New York that loves it as much as me, and we collaborated on a retelling of Shakespeare. And I don't know if there was any other mind that could have done it with me than that person. They just got that. But it doesn't mean we're going to write the next thing together, because then that's another collaboration. Definitely don't write it on a McDonald's napkin if you can't. But if you have to, just make sure you put it in a folder and save it for later. I'm still thoroughly convinced. I think I was in 8th grade. I had a folder of just notes and stories, and it got stolen at a McDonald's. And then a movie came out, and I know I'm thinking I'm top of the food chain, but I swear that was my movie idea, and Jean-Claude Van Damme owes me a royalty check.
I still need to find the napkin. It has some very important stuff on it, and now I need to find it before I start drafting.
Well, I hope you find that napkin. But that would be my advice to you, is that every brain works different, and also collaborate with people that aren't writers. Every director I work with is my collaborator. We help, even if they're not physically writing the dialogue, they're helping me write the dialogue. When I wrote the plays for Coterie, the kids wrote the plays with me. It was their ideas, their characters, their exuberance in the moment that helped me create what I wrote.
I'm not good at writing side characters, so I'm like, give me your characters, and just taking them.
Yeah, know your strength, know what builds for you, absolutely.
She makes the characters, I put them in the thing. She creates the stuff, and then I organize it all into a story.
It sounds like you have a good partner there. You had something to say? No? Does anyone else want to share? Yeah.
So I'm also neurodivergent, and I have a problem where I can only write neurodivergent characters. It's very difficult for me to step out of myself because, especially there are times when I don't understand social rules. And so it's very difficult because my characters need to understand those rules and operate by those rules, and I don't really know how to do that. I just try and observe as much as possible. But do you have any advice for trying to write from that perspective?
Yeah, I have had similar problems. Like, I write a screenplay and it looks like everyone is a neurodivergent, like, loveliness of the world that I see and how I see it. So the way I try to write characters that aren't neurodivergent, that are neurotypical, or trying to discover there, is remembering, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but people who frustrate me. And situations that frustrate me and my mind and my way of thinking. And I start inserting that into a character development. And it doesn't mean that that character is bad or that person that frustrated me was bad. It's that I don't understand why they did this. But they did do it for a reason, so then I start to explore why that is and finding the truth of that. Because how I find the truth is going to be very different than Troy, who was the prom king and was very much the bully. This is a made-up character, but I did not have a Troy who was the prom king. But he really frustrates me, and he is based off of a person that was really mean to me when I worked at a coffee shop and was clearly making fun of a neurodivergent kid. So that, to me, can now create a voice. Because that frustration can become a character, and that character can help you tell your story. Yeah. I think that's it.
No, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, from the neurotypical side, I really recommend you talking to high school educators about how you think so that they can work with kids.
I thank you. I'm trying to
You
do.
know, it makes me sad
Yeah.
that you went through all that.
Thank you.
So I
Yeah.
apologize for you going through that. No one should go through that.
No.
But from your perspective and your career and your success, school is all about structure. And it doesn't fit the folks on either end of the bell curve.
That's right.
And your experience could really open a lot of eyes for educators today.
I appreciate you saying that, and thank you. That is something I'm trying to do. One of the big reasons I'm collaborating so much with Coterie is because I am able to step into classrooms and talk with teachers and educators and kids. I work with libraries and teach kids at the library because there are so many neurodivergent kids that just want to suck in information and want to be able to tell their stories. And maybe you're going to get them there by doing a one-shot D&D, and then everyone can sit around there and talk about what is amazing to them. And doing that in more public settings like a school, letting the teachers know that this is how we're connecting with kids, that every kid is not going to be, and also not leaving out neurotypical kids. Like, they are also very hungry for information too, but the world is set up for them. So making sure that everyone, educators, teachers of all kind, know exactly what you're saying, that there is a kid out there who's going to be really struggling because no one's actually talking to them. They're talking about them. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much.